And it's a whole new week. Week number 2 here for the SPL. We've got a whole fantastic set of games for you today, North America specifically. Today we're going to start off Randozos versus Denial. Two middle-of-the-pack teams. I think if you weren't here for week number 1, you're sitting here saying, hey, come on, F-Dot, you're being a little nice to the clowns. But watching what Whalrus and his team could do last week against the opposition, really, this team looks completely different from last year.
They surprised us all with the first win against Envious in the first week. They only found 2 wins in their last split. Denial, you say that they're a middle-of-a-pack team, and I would have agreed with you before they started, but now coming up very strong with a 4-0 clean record at the top of the NA standings.
Absolutely. I was more Randozos have made the jump up, as has Denial. You know, I do think it's a little unfair. They're obviously number 1 in our league with 6 points, as per our new point system is concerned. So the Orange Dogs certainly on top of things, and what they've been doing has been very strong. Pretty much their old same Denial core of the idea of, hey, let's be heavily objective focused and just game plan strategy centric, and that's how they've been able to find their wins.
It's all about the synergy that Denial has. Shadowq being an old veteran leader in the support position. We have Homiefe with Hurriwind, which always has that great synergy.
Absolutely.
After leaving Store. Then Benji and Vetium together have been playing for a while.
Yeah, I think the acquisition of Hurriwind and Homiefe really worked out. You've got this core, like you said, on the outside, and then you introduce these 2 players that they're not individual 1, individual 2. You've got the outside core and the inside core really coming together as sort of 2 separate units, and the team will work together, bringing them all together. Whereas it's a different story for Randozos. You've got Whalrus leading the charge of Mirage, moswal, Wubbn, and Ghost, who will be sitting out for Wowy this week. But the point there is more about sort of, I've been looking at them as a baby enemy. Whalrus really sort of being the head dude in charge, the guy on top, sort of bringing together a group of rookies, and Wubbn, of course, a little bit of a veteran. He's been around here and there. I don't know if I'd call him a veteran, but this team has really been working to bring all of the pieces together, whereas Denial sort of have 2 separate ones.
Yeah, coming from the relegations, Randozos, Whalrus was speaking about basically how he was trying to lead the team, which is a totally new experience for him, and the rest of his players as well. They showed a great stuff against Envious. Mirage was even diving the tier 1 tower just to make a statement, so I'm expecting bigger things from Randozos throughout this split.
A lot of good instincts coming out from the Dozos this time around. Certainly a new instance of the Clowns. And let's take a look at how these guys do it in picks and bans. Denial Esports on the left. They'll get your first pick and your first ban as well. So we'll see where everybody winds up.
If Randozos have been doing their homework, they would have seen that Denial, they've been leaning very heavily on this Bacchus pick for Shadowq. They've already picked it in every single one of their games.
And it's been very powerful. Bacchus in general has been a go-to pick, but Bacchus has been one of Shadowq's old pocket picks for a long time now, so now meta and playstyle come together. Players get very happy when that sort of happens, so Bacchus likely to be a first pick unless banned here. But our number 2 teams generally, and I mean 99% of the time plus, wind up banning Fafnir and Nemesis specifically.
Especially Denial, but this time around, Denial, they've always been banning Nemesis. They left it open on purpose just to allow the Randozos to ban. More than likely, should be the Susanoo pick for, unless it's going to be the Kuang, yeah. Knowing Homiefe, he likes to lean on this kind of heavy burst mage coming out of the jungle. Hurriwind is going to try to complement that, and these 2 playing together will just rotate everywhere together in the jungle.
Yeah, the Kuang, I mean, Homiefe can win games by himself on the Kuang. I'm the number 1 guy that preaches Smite about teamwork and it's a team esport, but Kuang in the hands of Hurriwind, or Homiefe rather, can easily just go off. So got to be careful of that. Randozos will respond with some sustain out of Guan, very powerful sustain, and of course the Neith selection should provide some defense as well.
And the Neith selection was actually to take it away from Denial, because every time the Kuang has been picked, I think Hurriwind ran it twice in conjunction with Homie's Kuang, and that's a strategy that Randozos definitely saw and wanted to take away from Denial.
Right, the setup of the World Weaver, wherever the target is, it stuns, allows Homiefe's Kuang to catch up, deal a little bit of extra damage, and allows the execute to come that much easier. So a little bit of an easy combination stripped away by the Randozos. The Randozos don't want the Hunter playing on her anytime soon. Susanoo will also be the ban from Denial Esports.
If they're going to go for more jungle bans, I would expect a Thor ban on top, taking that away from Mirage. Neith and Thor, not a very combination that you really want to deal with on the side of Randozos. But it's going to be the Vamana, and I like this ban from Denial because both Whalrus and Benji lean on Vamana and Ravana. So right away, Randozos take away that soul laner option.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Ravana is a character that we see on these two soul laners more so than the rest of the league, I think, combined, to be honest with you, so that'll be taken away. What we haven't mentioned is the Rom choice next to the Freya. Now, Snoopy has taken, and that caught me off guard, Snoopy has taken Rom mid a number of times and done relatively successful, but Snoopy is, I feel, a Rom player first, a mid player second. This looks like it'll either be moswal or Vetium taking Rama. Where do you think Freya's going to land here?
I would expect that the Freya would be in the dual lane.
Okay.
It would have to be. I don't expect it to be Kuang and Freya, because early game Freya, in those little small jungle skirmishes, is not the best guy that you want to have in those small 2v2 or 3v3s, you know, levels 4 through 7, around there.
That's being nice. Early Freya is not at all anything. No clear whatsoever. We have seen Freya go mid, but usually paired with an early game jungler like a Fenrir or somebody with even more clear like a Thor. So since we have the Kuang in the jungle, I think you can make the assumption that Freya will wind up in the hunter role, and Hurriwind's going to take the unconventional hunter to the mid spot. So again, denial, trying something new. Hurriwind was also the mid laner that brought Apollo to the mid as well. So Hurriwind always ready to play something a little bit unconventional.
Both teams are here to play unconventionally as they're grouped up around the soul lane jungle, looking for an early pick. Looking at the relics, there's no curses or anything like that, but there is a sprint on the side of Shadowq. We saw him last time. I forgot who he was against, but he was able to found that easy first blood with a belly flop into the sprint, allowed the rest of his team to catch up for that early first blood.
Yeah, so a lot of early game shenanigans coming out from Denial, or at least that's their standard. That's what they're known for. These days, right now, with 10 seconds until minions spawn, doesn't look like anything crazy is going to happen here at Anatoly. We've just got the relatively standard start coming out from everybody. But let's talk about the new advent of the Serqet. Serqet hasn't been played for a while, and since then we've seen her come up specifically to counteract the healing out of Guan, and now that she's on Guan's side, she's just sort of a pick here for Mirage. What about Serqet has brought her back?
I think that after her nerf with her movement speed and some of her cooldowns being hit a little bit, she's been back because, like you mentioned, the sustain on some gods, as well as it's a surprise factor. You don't expect a Serqet gank all the time, and especially in the solo lane, I expect a lot of aggression between Whalrus and Benji, and this is a perfect pick for Mirage to try to exploit that.
So we'll see how Serqet works out. With that in mind, Serqet a little bit later of a character, definitely not an early game god. When she hits level 5, you'll have that ultimate available, but really, it's more about the items than the levels when it comes to Serqet. Once that critical strike comes online, that zigzag, Deathbane, that becomes pretty troublesome. So just to refresh a course, since it's been a while since we've seen some Serqet. On the other hand, we've got Rom mid, which it should be a long time since we've seen this character, but it's just been a couple of days.
Hurriwind's going to be trying to channel his inner Snoopy, finding that pentakill the first game of his SPL, but trying to pair this up with the Kuang is something that Denial really like to do. Putting the Ram is a nice spot because the Rama here in middle, you're going to be able to find the snipes to allow the Kuang to follow up with his execute.
Which is the idea, again, going the way of where the Neith was stripped, having that ability to lower the threshold, lower the kill threshold for your Kuang to find the execute a little bit easier is certainly something nice. Definitely want to keep characters like New Wa in mind. Anybody that has this global situation, when you've got a strong Kuang player in your team, which at this point every team should have a strong Kuang player on their team, you got to start thinking about what characters can sort of strip damage away from the team fight.
We talked about the soul lane matchup being aggressive. Whalrus playing at the tower line of Benji. This is something that Mirage and Homiefe have to be looking at if they want to find an early first blood.
And this is, again, Benji is going to wind up being bullied for the majority of this until probably about 4 more levels solely, at which point Amaterasu was able to clear pretty much straight up. Even without the Bluestone, she'll be able to one-shot the wave. The Bluestone is really there for these exchanges against the god.
Great overhead kick preventing the second ability from Amaterasu. And this is now where Benji has the sustain by stance switching the aura. He has about half health. And Whalrus is going to have the boots too. So Benji, he should be able to clear this efficiently and decide to rotate back into this laning phase with Homie.
And he'll rotate over to these elementals and use the tiny bit of poke that he was able to dish out to his advantage. We talk a lot about power spikes this season, about backing at the right time. You want to actually buy. Gold in hand is worthless unless you're Fafnir. You want to actually buy the items before you go ahead and fight. But how little is too little? Is Boots 2 versus Boots 1 that much of an upgrade for Whalrus to burn his teleport? Because now Denial can make a play under the Gold Fury and Whalrus won't be able to respond.
It's a part of power spike because of these buffs that are respawning right here, right now at the 3-minute mark. Speed buff respawning, Boots 2 for Whalrus, Benji's in the soul lane having to give it up. But on the flip side, red buff is going to be invaded by Denial.
Great response from Denial. And whether this is a response or just two separate ideas on either side of the table is something that, you know, only the players can answer for themselves. But that's, I really want to bring attention to the fact that Whalrus went ahead and backed for those Boots 2 in anticipation of that speed camp, because that's what we're seeing out of Randozos this season. When people say that Randozos seem like a different team, they're really talking about the cerebral element of the team. They seem like they've done a lot more homework.
Great job by Hurriwind surviving that mid gank, finding the purification at the right timing, not going to be pulled back outside of his tower. Now, without that Serqet ultimate, there's going to be aggression from Denial.
And there's the ultimate out of Shadowq, bringing everybody low. Homiefe has his available, can't seem to find a target, but a couple of shots out of Vetium will bring everybody low. Homie now has the targets, but not the opportunity to go find the execute. You'll see Homiefe wrap around the back, but unlikely to really find anybody, just going for the speed buff.
Immediately going for the speed buff after winning the team fight. A game of inches. You win a little skirmish here, you force them into left harpies, you basically no Serqet ulti, you win the team fight because of the left lane, and now you're rewarded with the speed buff. Overall, I thought Denial were going to slowly start falling behind because of the speed and the blue buff that were invaded only for a red, but off of that small win, now Denial with a slight lead.
Yeah, able to even it up with an invade of their own. Hurriwind going to head back to lane and clean up what's left of this mid wave, along with Shadowq. That should help him out just a little bit.
Hurriwind just basically going to back. He's going to finish off the Transcendence, and normally we don't see that kind of a start out of a Rama. They're more inclined to go for the enhance instead of abilities, but spamming those astral arrows and making sure you never run out of mana to have your roll available or your ultimate, because that ultimate costs a lot of mana. You always have to be careful about your mana usage as Ram.
And that's one of the big things, the big differences about playing Ram in the mid versus the left lane or the long lane, right? You really got to come down to and look at the differences in the kits. And Transcendence almost, I wouldn't say absolutely necessary in the mid lane, but just makes it a little bit easier because, like you said, you have to use a lot more mana. You can't share some of the early game, you can't share the clear with your support. Once it reaches this second sort of round of buffs, well, then you get the whole core of the team here and everybody sort of throws something at the wave. But those first couple of waves, very important. And even though moswal playing this Agni doesn't have the best early game, something that Hurriwind has to keep in mind.
Something we didn't touch on was this Agni pick. It did struggle early on, but in general struggles early on rather. But this game already transitioned to level 8 without any care in the world. Didn't get pressured too much. Had to use the purification earlier on. But now he's going to be in a spot once those level 2 bombs start coming out. Hurriwind has to be super careful about his positioning.
Agni's one of my favorite characters in the game, to be honest with you. He's got interesting, he doesn't have straight bursts. His burst is interesting and requires thought process. Because if you go ahead and you drop 2 bombs, now all of a sudden you only have one option.
And there's going to be a team fight. Shadowq going to get bombed out 2 stuns. Serqet ultimate on top. That should be first blood with the World Weaver.
Yeah, Whalrus going to take down the support for the first blood, but it's answered back immediately by Benji as he takes out the opponent's support, Wubbn. So Wubbn falls for Shadowq. All in all, would be an even trade if first blood wasn't awarded a 500 gold bounty. So Randozos with a clean 1,000 gold lead above their opposition. And, you know, you said team fight. That was just Shadowq getting picked off. He was where he definitely should not have been. Little out of position
looking for Mirage, going to force out the escape, and Homie's just going to casually walk back as Blue Buff has respawned. And I like the play, though, between these two supports because Bacchus, he tried to jump onto Wubbn, forced out the cavalry charge immediately, but then just got stunned out and completely focus fired. I love the rotations overall from Denial because they were there to defend their own speed buff. That was the strategy for Randozos going in to invade the speed yet again.
But Shadowq was more by himself, so just didn't work out. The other hand, the solo lane gank seemingly working out until Homiefe spots another teammate, has to retreat.
Still having his ultimate. I like the chase idea. As soon as the Guan showed up, recognized like, okay, he's about to get sustained up. Maybe meditation is up, but definitely the conviction will get him out of that execute threshold, capitalizing on the aggression, but still disciplined enough to go back to the lane.
Yeah, keep in mind, Homiefe's execute threshold very low with that ultimate only at rank 1. Shadowq's here one more time. 3-on-3, doesn't want to go into it just yet.
So the cameraman did highlight over it just to see the healing done by the execute. It scales up starting at 10%. The execute threshold is static 30%. It used to actually scale up as you would level it up, which made Kuang very good in the late game, so I had to scale it down.
Right now, though, Randozos, they've got a good look here in the mid lane, especially with the rotation of Whalrus. Should they want to go all in here on both Hurriwind and Shadowq? Looks like the decision has been called off. Whalrus will rotate back over to his lane. More importantly, those elementals spawning up pretty soon. Homiefe instead lurking on the left side, forces out the jump from the enemy Neith.
Just basically alleviating pressure to allow Freya to not be bullied out. She doesn't have Fatalis yet, so once she does have that item finished, she's going to be looking for some very aggressive plays, especially against Wowy. In general, Neiths are very easy to predict the backflip. Once that happens, you can line up your whoop, no problem, force out the purification, and then Homie can capitalize.
Yeah, Neith is very unsafely safe, if you know what I mean, right? The backflip is a great button to push when you want to avoid a specific ability, but everyone in a 100-yard radius knows where you're landing after you backflip. If you're in the mid lane and have vision on the Neith, when she backflips, you know exactly where she's landing.
You even have enough time for Hurriwind to get off your first 2 snipes during that backflip. There's not much, there's a lot of travel time rather, and there's not much landing time maneuverability available for the Neith. So it's going to be very dependent on how both of these junglers look at the side lanes, whether it's solo or the hunter, honestly. There's a lot of aggression on both soon.
I mean, we've had a lot of excitement about Giannis long-range snipes, right? And the majority of those wind up off of, we see fantastic plays off of Neith flips. Same with Ra. Ra ultimates very useful when they see that Neith flip. So very predictable, but still a good dodge ability. Hurriwind now looking down 3 players, seeing Randozos go into his right side jungle. It's all about the speed buff play. Wow, we try to get out of trouble here on the left-hand side.
Vetium still not having the Fatalis to get in position to find that whoop, but Cavalry Charge coming out, not going to connect onto Homiefe. He was still stealth from his water illusion, so a nice risk from Wubbn, but not connecting.
Finds the kiss, not going to be too strong, though, as the jungler is able to find a way out before he gets stunned by the long-range moswal.
And something that I've noticed is Denial has changed their game plan in general. Normally they're more aggressive early on, but they recognize they have these late game characters. But hold that thought. Vetium forced to use his ultimate. He could be put in a really awkward spot, but going back to his team beautifully.
Yeah, very well played in the zone stun coming out from moswal rather. Not going to allow the players to aggress, but Homiefe has a different plan. He's going right into the clouds, brings himself down very low, unable to find the kill.
That was Homie and Hurriwind trying to set up the execute for Kuang in general. They saw that Serqet still has the beats, but if you force it out at this stage, you're setting yourself up for a future kill potential. Now, Randozos, they're trying to force the Gold Fury, but they're too low.
There's a double bounce, and there's some trouble out of Vetium again. moswal going to do a good job of zoning out the rest of Denial with the noxious fumes, preventing anybody from really going there. Mirage by himself finds the kill on a Homiefe, goes very deep, hides within his own minions, and gets away safe.
Beautiful play. Vetium doesn't have the ultimate, gonna get stunned down. No purification available as well. Just needs to connect on one more in hand. Finds it with a safe backflip.
Well done by Randozos and the substitute. Wow, he's stepping in for Ghost, certainly making it count. Wubbn leading the charge. Randozos want to make more off of this play. Thought about the tower, decided against it, and now will instead head to the Gold Fury with 2 players down.
I like the bullying of Shadowq there because now he's forced to back. He has no mana. After that Spirit out connected, he was forced to belly flop away thinking that Randozos was going to dive the tower, but now it's only 2 against 5 members defending this gold.
And again, moswal gets the long-range stun. Very important plays out of the Agni player. Randozos pick up the objective, and they're up 2,200.
Wubbn might be in a little bit of trouble, but a nice stun from moswal going to prevent it. Whalrus with a great zone. Free Gold Fury coming up the 11.5-minute mark. Randozos are in a good spot, but they need to snowball off this because I'm still looking at the composition of Denial. They have Kuang, Freya, Rama, and Amaterasu. All these characters are so great late game.
Oh, absolutely. Randozos have a 2,200 lead, which is certainly something to hang your hat on, but the characters across the way aren't exactly adept at this point in the game. You know, you look at the Serqet, and she'll obviously be a fantastic choice as the game gets later and later, but Agni known for a lot, not necessarily late game prowess. Same to be said about Neith. So Randozos need to make the plays now, and that's what they're looking to do. Many players of Denial low on the right side, Whalrus able to pick up Shadowq.
Just Shadowq trying to save out Homiefe. That was caught in an interesting predicament because Mirage was still showing pressure, but it was fake pressure. It wasn't actual pressure. They didn't really want to commit too hard past that Fire Giant.
So break that down for me. What is the difference between fake pressure and the real deal?
You're just trying to get cooldowns down, for example. You're trying to get the water illusion away. You're saying like, hey, I might commit onto you, use your escape now so I can come back at you later once it's down.
So there was no real plan there of going after Homiefe. Nobody was actually going to go that deep, but throw a couple of things at him, see what he wastes, and then capitalize off of that situation.
Yeah, because Homiefe turned around just to get some more poke onto Mirage, that allowed the rest of Randozos to catch up slightly, and then Shadowq was forced to try to peel for Homiefe, and then instantly capitalizing on that with a nice ultimate from Whalrus and Mirage, just to get a free support kill with that only has the Spirit's Robe finished at the moment.
Exactly, so it makes him a little bit easier to take down. Fatalis online for Vetium now. That's why he was able to take that fight a little bit, but one of the biggest one of the more undervalued things, I wouldn't say undervalued, less spoken about pieces of Neith's kit, however, is the attack speed slow off of Unravel. We saw Vetium get caught up by that and just completely nerfs his ability to go ahead and take care of the lane. Taking care of the lane is Shadowq, jumping right on top of the enemy in the middle lane, but no follow-up, and he'll push back on his own tower.
And Randozos, they're grouping up because they recognize they have this slight lead from the Gold Fury from their 4-to-1 kill ratio now. They have to group up and find somebody out of position. They forced Homiefe's Water Illusion earlier on in the mid lane. They elected to be very safe and not use the cavalry charge to commit onto that tier 1 tower because at the time, Whalrus and Mirage still had to wait for their ultimates to come up.
Here's one of my favorite things that Homiefe does. So Homiefe will ward. In general, you'll see him lower than the rest of his team as far as wards placed. You can see he's only placed he's placed about 3 right now, as opposed to the 4 of his other teammates. But what he does totally is he walks around with the sentry ward. He doesn't buy a regular ward. He just generally has a sentry ward in his pocket. And when his teammates spot out a ward or he has a gank path that he wants to take advantage of, that's where he's going to drop his clear ward. And that allows him to really, like I said, create his own paths for jungling. So he wards offensively, I would say.
Great job by Randozos. They forced out the Water Illusion, but they're getting turned on right away. Wubbn doesn't have ultimate. It's going to take it to the sky, lands, but nobody follows up. Wubbn falls to Hurriwind, though.
Yeah, Hurriwind gets a couple of good shots off out of the sky, and Randozos, they wind up trading out. They lost their support for taking out the Homiefe. That's a good play. Randozos going to take that one home.
Normally, I would say that's a great trade for support for the jungler, but it's a Guan Yu that has a lot of sustain in general. Level 11 compared to the level 12 Kuang. At this point, I would actually rather have Guan Yu.
Actually, you know what? It's again, talking about the compositions. This is a good trade in virtually any other situation, but the fact is Randozos have to win a lot earlier than I think other teams will because of their composition versus the super late game prowess, and they realize that now, and Randozos aggressing on the tier tower. There's the jump in from Shadowq. Goodbye, Mirage. A little bit too deep. Still pushing forward is Denial, not going to get stunned out, but rooted. Vetium popped up into the Valkyrie's discretion aggressively, still going to be blocked out by Shadowq. Well done by the Denial dual lane, pushing Randozos off of the tower.
And this is why you need Guan Yu. That little bit of heal could have topped off Mirage to escape from that crowd control. Now Benji just deciding to split push the whole time, found the tier 1, doing a lot of damage to the tier 2, already level 16. He was a little bit behind earlier on to Whalrus.
And so, just expanding on what I was saying earlier, tower still being aggressed on. Benji feeling very safe about this one. Will ult to get Whalrus out of his hair, but has to dash out before it's over. Wubbn now looking for the kill. No dash available for the Amaterasu. Stunned out. Here's help from moswal as well. A couple of bombs, and that should be it. Toasted is Benji. There's the first death for the Denial solo laner.
And that's a long respawn timer. Gold Fury's about to respawn. This is an open invitation for Randozos to begin the gold. However, they're starting the speed instead. They want to make sure they have that buff because there will be a team fight around this important objective.
And again, it's all about the timing for Randozos. I think if they were a different team composition, they take the trade of Homiefe for Wubbn and walk away. Awesome, we got to trade, see you later. But Randozos have identified the fact that they don't have as late a game as Team in Denial, so they need to take these objectives now, which again goes back to what you were saying. I mean, that trade, you need the Guan Yu. You need the sustain to allow that push to actually happen.
Unfortunately, Randozos, they allowed this Amaterasu to respawn, and she has the teleport available, so now it's going to be on 5-on-5. Homiefe trying to contest the blue buff away from Whalrus, and it looks like he was successful.
Randozos going to start the Gold Fury. No Wrath on either side of the board, so don't have to worry about that one. Shadowq's got fantastic objective secure with the belly flop into ultimate. And Randozos are aware. They see Denial show up, and they will leash the Gold Fury and head back to lane.
Really good vision overall from Randozos. Aggressive positioning and warding on the bottom side of Denial's base. Even in the mid lane has a regular ward just to spite out the rotations between solo, middle, and duo around where the tier 1 used to be.
Randozos got beat a lot by some of the earlier rotations or the mid-game rotations. The early game was pretty strong last week for Randozos, but as the games got a little bit later, you saw Randozos get beat out by just players being sort of by themselves or away from good situations. This extra warding is very important to make sure that as we're in the mid-game now, approaching 20 minutes, that Randozos with the towers down don't find themselves into trouble.
And I expect Benji to just sit in the solo lane the same way he did before because of the fact that he's Amaterasu. He wants to be in the late game form to have the maxed out aura, which he already does have, but to get that level 20 ultimate online, it's going to just shred away all the squishy characters, whether it's moswal or even forcing the early backfoot from Wowy to allow Homiefe to follow up afterwards.
Yeah, he's really looking for this disruption. Amaterasu winds up being so strong in the late game as she gets everything online. Level 17 already. Certainly able to make the impact right about now. But it's about what his teammates want to do.
This is the point in time where you don't really want to trade with the Amaterasu because of her sustain from stance switching in the auras. Going to be able to also run away or catch up to you 20 or 25% movement speed once that is capped out for you and your team.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. Everybody goes really fast.
Homiefe looking for a gank in the solo lane. Surprisingly, we haven't seen many ganks in the solo early on in the game compared to how aggressive these two solo laners are. But now trying to go onto Whalrus, he's going to have to ultimate, recognizing this, trying to cover the option, but you can't water Lucian through a wall.
Yeah, Homiefe made an interesting play there. We'll break it down in a second. Shadowq being surrounded by Randozos, absolutely annihilated. Mirage gets the last hit on him as he gets surrounded. And Homie finally does find the kill onto Whalrus across the map. Randozos, they've got the numbers, but still going to have a back out of Wowy. 3 players here by the Gold Fury totally. Don't think they want to make the play just yet.
Neither team really wants to do this play. We have a rotation from Homiefe back in mid, and the whole idea and the goal was to allow Benji to get this tier 2 tower on the right after killing Whalrus, and Denial executed this perfectly, and they stopped the Gold Fury attempt by Randozos at the same time, finding Shadowq.
Now, one of the small problems there for Denial, I think, is Randozos going to start the Gold Fury, was that Homiefe didn't trust the silence out of his teammate. Benji got the silence onto Whalrus, which means he couldn't ultimate over the tower. But in any event, Gold Fury being aggressed on, going to be countered. Benji wants to grab it, changes his mind, now looking for the fight. Randozos on their back foot, retreat.
That was a great overall route from Wowy, preventing the chase from happening. Vetium is kind of poked out, has to sustain a little bit. Gonna go back to base. I was expecting him to leech a little bit off of those boars, electing to be super safe because he would have only put him about 60% health anyway.
Yeah, not gonna find it just yet. Instead, Randozos is gonna think twice about what they want to do right now. Team's pretty much even. Denial with a very slight lead, about 1,000 or so, even less. Team separated by 3 kills as well. Randozos keep trying this Gold Fury as we're 20 minutes in, but they cannot seem to find a good spot to really commit hard.
The problem is Randozos, they had a little bit of a lead earlier on, and now this is where the curve starts going into Denial's favor with their characters. The Freya's level 17, Kuang almost 17, Benji's almost level 20. The team fight from Denial is going to be very devastating for Randozos. These picks that they found earlier on from the Serqet is not going to be as feasible as it was before.
So we see the Witchblade on the side of Denial. This is really going to counteract Ravana more so than Neith, in my opinion. But really, we see the Witchblade, honestly, I like to think the magic number is 3. When you have 3 basic attack characters, that's when these anti-basic attack items really come into play. Randozos, they've got 2.5, if you really want to call the Serqet a basic attack character. I mean, not really. She's not looking for successive basics, just pretty much 1 to seal the deal on the passive. In all honesty, I would actually expect to see the Witchblade on the other side. You've got Freya, Ram, and an Amaterasu, they're all basic attack based.
Even Kuang to an extent, once he does have the Dragon Steroid active. Gonna find Shadowq with the kiss, but not wanting to commit onto with the belly flop onto 2. Cavalry charge stunning for the peel.
And Denial trying to make things happen after the invade and the execution. There's to jump forward. Shadowq gets everything started off nicely, and Benji and Homiefe follow up fantastically. The banish into the silence, and Vetium picks up 1 for himself. It's 7-all. Denial even the kills, and they're gonna look to push their lead forward. To look towards the gold sphere.
This is the late game Denial that they were drafting for. They started off slow on purpose because they know their power spike is now. Once all these gods are about 17 or higher. And also the positioning from Randozos was a little questionable because they didn't have a true lead to force out the gold sphere. They were relying very heavily. Hold that thought. We're going to have moswal taking out Homie, but in response, going to dive the tier 2, finding the exchange.
I love that play. Homiefe uses the ultimate to toss the character up, knowing Hurriwind's going to do the same and wait for the landing with the shots. Again, you want to talk about, usually the jungle sets up for the mid, and it's very, well, it's more conventional, right? A Najad to a giant Kraken. Well, here we have the Rom snipes coming down after an Kuang non-execute ultimate. I love the creativity coming out from Denial, and like you said, they find themselves with their first real lead of the game right now, 5,000 gold or so, but this is when they're expected to have their first real lead of the game. Freya doesn't exist until about level 15 or so. She comes online with the Fatalis and then her third item, whatever it may be. But when you come on 15, 16, 17, that's where you get to see everybody else on the squad join up.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Randozos forced that goal here, honestly. It was a 5-on-5. Whalrus was on the right-hand side just farming it up. And Denial, they want to be team-fighting at this stage of the game because of all their utility with Benji's aura in general, and then having the great knock-up from Shadowq, defending the ward so brilliantly against 3.
Yeah, I think Randozos, one of the issues that they had here is that they weren't as active early on as you might expect this composition to really go for. You can get a lot of strong Serqet ultimates into Agni stuns and then follow that up into wherever that one winds up being, but just not as active as Randozos need to be early.
And they had an opportunity once they did kill they killed a soul laner on the right-hand side, and they elected not to go for the gold fear right away. Vetium gonna be forced to use the purification. Wubbn not really in position, but here comes Mirage.
And right to the sky goes the Freya. She'll land down, and Mirage gonna follow up, zigzag forward, finds the taunt, but turns around as Hurriwind shows up and the basics are raining in. Good cripple, right to the sky. It's a little bit of rotation from everybody else. Mirage way out of range, and Hurriwind finds himself empty-handed.
Now we're going to see Homiefe going to get pulled back into his team. Shadowq looking for the 3-man Intoxicate, followed up by Benji's ult.
And there's the damage coming out of Vetium. Taken to the sky by Homiefe. Perfect teammates come and combine for the perfect team play. Double kill for Homiefe as Denial reaches double digits. And Whalrus still here trying to protect the tower and will successfully do so. Randozos tier 1 tower on the left side stays up.
Guan, you not in this team fight anymore. Randozos, they should be very passive and careful because now they could easily set up a trap around this jungle side. Shadowq is back and does get stopped by Whalrus, but it's a 5-on-3. If Denial really wanted to, they could collapse back into this team fight. Mirage has to be very careful.
You know, and speaking more to the timings of these team compositions, right? We keep mentioning late game composition for Denial. Look how high the damage charts Bacchus is right now. That is something that is indicative of the fact that this is a late game team. Bacchus is very high. He's 11,000 damage right now because he's been active in every single team fight that Denial has, and the earlier game characters aren't as effective. As the game gets later, in 5 or 10 more minutes, we'll see Bacchus just be completely left in the dust by all these characters that will just launch forward as their real activation time is right about now.
And this is a Bacchus without Magai's boots, right? This is something that Shadowq is very comfortable with. This is 100% play rate for Shadowq in the SPL so far. This split is Bacchus. This is his 5th game already with it. And teams haven't really been recognizing just how comfortable he is with it. They elected to pick up the Guan and the Neith after the Kuang pick from Denial instead of taking away Shadowq's Bacchus.
At the same time, totally. I mean, Shadowq is one of the oldest supports in the books. You take away the Bacchus, you'll say, okay, I'll play one of my other characters that I'm extremely adept at. So you're not going to be able to ban him out necessarily. But I think there is something to be said about knocking out that 100% play rate.
The comfortability. The problem also is it's a Bacchus as belly flop as Wubbn's going to get whooped up, taking a lot of poke, but but dashing into safety. The knockup in general from Bacchus is very dangerous, right? That's exactly why we see Denial ban the Vulcan in their first 2 bans, because they recognize the threat of how much of an impact knockups are in Smite in general.
I mean, it's one of the best CCs in the game. They're not really affected by DR. It's just a set amount of time. There's the Banish who lifts somebody up in the sky, and Shadowq looking for the wait. He's waiting for the right time to really head in. Doesn't want to waste the initiation when they know they can get the tier 1 for free. Tier 2 might require a little bit more of a heavy hand, so keep your eye on Shadowq. Thank you, support.
Homiefe is disengaging into the mid lane, wants to get those left side mids, and that's going to force out Denial to back off of this team fight. But recognizing this is Randozos, they're grouped up, they want to force the situation.
Yeah, Randozos want to take this fight, and they're right to take this fight, Anatoly. This is a fight that they're good at. They've separated Denial. That's exactly what they want. 3 separate team fights. Benji isolated by himself. Shadowq on the backside. Now finally, players going to get turned around. Whalrus now the character isolated. Everybody grouping up now, finally. Denial low on the HP. Shadowq still waiting to find a spot. Hurriwind, that's his ultimate. The only one left is Homiefe. Can't find a target. So Randozos start a great fight, but they're unable to really find a single target and bring the kills home.
Well, they can keep going because of Guan used sustain onto Wubbn, the teleport coming back from Whalrus. Benji's teleport is available as well, but Denial looks like they're giving up this tier 1 tower. No one really in position, and I like this call. They have to prioritize the better tier 2 defense.
Exactly, and this is a very important play by Randozos. Like we keep mentioning, their time is running out pretty much. At some point, you know, late game, early game teams, they're not black and white. I think we're making it seem a little bit heavier than it is in actuality. You know, the team isn't guaranteed to win once it's 30 minutes, but it does become increasingly difficult. So Randozos have to fight now.
Whalrus gonna zone out Hurriwind, gonna force to use the ultimate just to prevent the knockup, the threat of the knockup, but Homie blinking in and disengaging beautifully away from moswal's bombs.
Just trying to see if he can chase any more relics out. You've got a Sanctuary left on the mid lane, and that's really what he's trying to find. Randozos have to respond to this Gold Fury. Shadowq gonna stun out too, and then find the knockup as well. There's the stun coming out from moswal, stopping the Guan Yu in his tracks.
Mirage looking for the flank on the right-hand side as the rest of his team forced to retreat on the left. Can't really find it, but Gold Fury gonna get taken down.
Yeah, Guan Yu couldn't quite make it. We saw the separation from Denial after moswal gets a couple of good stuns, but Vetium still finds Wubbn, unable to really make it happen. Wowy's low, jumping forward is a Shadowq. Up to the sky goes Hurry. There's 2 shots off of the backflip. Can't seal it, but Benji can. Homiefe takes 1 as well. Hurriwind gets a second one as Mirage stuck in his ultimate.
That's 4 dead. It's going to be a deicide once the Sanctuary wears off, and Denial in the lead heavily after that deicide. Gold Fury down. They're going to go straight to the Fire Giant if they really wanted to. They have so many options. They could have pushed out left, pushed out mid, get the Phoenix before the Fire Giant, but recognizing this, they're just going to all group up. Benji also with the teleport going to regroup with him.
And again, I am a fan of the Fire Giant before the Phoenix here, specifically because, again, Randozos know that time is running out and they have to keep fighting. If you take the Phoenix on the left side, it's free. But then once you start for your second Phoenix, because you have to take out a tower, you might be met with some resistance by Randozos, and theoretically, it's a fight they can take. When you have the Fire Giant next to you, it's a little bit less so. Plus, you've got the sustain. Once you get ticked down from a little bit of fighting underneath the tier tower, you're able to keep going because your health just going right on up.
Another unfortunate factor for Denial was there was no minions on the left-hand side to really get that Phoenix right off the bat. That's the most precious Phoenix that you can possibly get, the opposite side lane from Fire Giant, but very content with getting that Fire Giant. They should be able to group up almost with no resistance to get these last 2 remaining tier 2 towers and then probably go for that endgame build before they get these Phoenixes.
Exactly. Randozos, like I said, they need to fight into Denial. They can fight into Denial with a 10,000 gold deficit. I don't think they can fight into Denial with the Fire Giant as well, which is why I was a big fan of the objective call. Denial now going to try and get a little sneaky on Wowy. He's able to find his way out. Tier 1 tower goes down, like you said, without much resistance. I expect the tier 2, on the left. Tier 2 in the middle lane as well.
Benji just doing a good job zoning the members from Randozos. This tier 2 tower in mid will fall as well, and this is very important for Randozos to find the right separation to prevent the engage from Shadowq and Benji. This is how Denial have been winning these team fights. Those two aggressive gods go in, they force out the relics, and then you have the Ram Snipe and Homiefe trying to sync up for that execute.
Again, Denial, two pieces that are coming together as a whole. The Homiefe Hurriwind mid-jungle combination, and then the rest of the squad really creating this unit.
Benji forcing the situation, dashing into mid, moswal having to attend to the mid Phoenix defense, and now the rest of Denial as a result get the left side for free.
Yeah, no competition as Benji goes there by himself. We've seen some other teams try this out, but late game Amaterasu so incredibly tanky. Finally, the team shows up. Benji's half HP, but it just doesn't matter. Homiefe takes out one. Randozos try to play defense, but Vetium says absolutely not with offense of his own. Homiefe with the double un, and Benji gets one for himself. Still following up onto the ultimate solo laner. He'll be safe, but the Titan is a different story. Homiefe with 3 in our closing moments, and the Titan going to fall. Denial take game 1 against Randozos in over a half an hour of gameplay.
Just great tactics overall from Benji, pulling the members from Randozos away from that mid Phoenix. They couldn't retreat safely back into their Titan base, getting separated. Great play from Denial.
And as we saw, Homie got the unofficial quadra kill at the end, taking almost everybody out pretty much by himself. Vetium shows up and yoinks one away.
That's the threat of the late game out Kuang. Honestly, that's the threat of all of Denial in that composition that they had. It was a ticking time bomb for Randozos. If they didn't win the game by the 18 to 22 minute mark convincingly with like 8,000 gold lead plus, it was going to just eventually collapse under their feet.
Absolutely, and like I said, you really saw Randozos. They understood that. They understood that fact. And you know, when you look at a situation like that, a question that I've always wanted to ask a player, there was this. That was it was night and day, right? Denial, super late game, and I think you can get earlier game than we saw in Randozos, but they were clearly more early game. Is that a mistake by not having any late game answers outside of Serqet, or was that just how the draft goes?
I just say that it's not a mistake to draft in that specific way. I would say it's more of a mistake of how you can capitalize off of your early game. We didn't see any pressure in the solo lane from the Serqet, which could have found some early kills. We saw how aggressive Whalrus was against Benji in the beginning. Even playing at the tower line, there could have been some kill opportunities there. Now, granted, Randozos found the speed buff invade, answered immediately back by the red buff, but because they committed to Hurriwind under that tier 1 mid tower, there was no possible way for them to team fight on the left, and then they lost their own speed as a result. So overall, they're now doing such good tactics to answer back to that speed buff invade and grabbing a red at the same time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to watch Randozos over the course of this season. I think they remind me a lot of Hunger for More from last time around, because they have these straight up strategies that they execute, and then their opponent responds, and then later on they're going to go learn how to deal with that response. So game number